Hello dear friends. We're in a shop while we're waiting for our driver. He's waking up. We decided to taste the tea. And we're tasting Liubao cha. Surprisingly, they sometimes make loose leaf Liubao in these baskets. Traditionally, they're reserved for Lao cha. Tea has to breathe, first of all, as well as sheng puers, for example. And in fact, all aged teas have to breathe, the majority of them, except oolongs maybe. They don't need it so much. And for some teas it's prohibited. This one, she says, is younger than 10 years old. It's about 8 years. But the infusion is already quite dense, and it's not forced fermentation. I complimented her cup, said that it's beautiful, and she also has an excellent teapot from Jinzhou. As we're in Guangxi, everybody here uses Jinzhou teapots. Here it is, very pleasant. She aged it herself. I see it's aged rather powerfully, and of course she doesn't want to sell it, and it's not surprising. By the way, I noticed that this is the third place where people have nice teaware. This means they have good taste, though the place is in the countryside and it's a wilderness. You don't often encounter such a thing. For Liubao, it's absolutely okay that there's a gold mildew appearing on it and this white patina. That's how it's usually drunk. Even aged for more than 100 years is still considered healthy. Now we're drinking tea from this basket, and then we'll taste some from this one. We've gathered a collection of locals, looking at us and taking pictures. Foreigners do not frequent this place. The tea is delicious. It's even more original than teas of forced fermentation, made in a big factory, where they wish to simulate such a process. This is like Lao Cheng and Shu puer, but here it's even cooler, I think. In terms of natural fermentation, it ferments faster. Cheng cannot reach such a condition in 7 or 8 years, and Liubao does. Maybe because of climate conditions or the way of storing. It's very humid here, more humid than in Yunnan. Here in Liubao and in Guangxi, such baskets are very popular. Totally tired. Also fermented along with tea. And they usually like to place such baskets all around for decoration, or selling them. They're made of old wood pieces or bamboo, and they put tea inside and it ferments in such conditions, because it's necessary to have access to air, some kind of ventilation, so it's kept. Everything is old, dusty, and intentionally nobody wipes the dust off, for some kind of Lao feeling of age. It's very likeable. I'll probably buy something here for our shop, although I had them before for design. In fact, they're artificially aged sometimes. It's surely not 500 years old. Holding them over fumes or smoking it will be enough to age it, and it will look aged in a short time. Anyway, it looks very nice. So we have good first results. We found good enough Lao cha at a reasonable price. We're satisfied, and we'll go further to more remote villages to search a factory that produces more tea. We're starting to accept a proper rhythm, drink tea and eat meals. So now we have a very important thing to do. We need to have lunch. Extremely important. We're waiting for them to prepare. Such an informal canteen. They're always the same. In the countryside, the cooking is always delicious. Wherever you eat, it's always delicious. By the way, the Chinese people are fond of traditional medicine. Chinese, of course. And they often go to some villages for traditional Chinese cures of any type. You can find many kinds of tinctures. They're essentially tinctures made of fruits, serpents, bees, or various roots. Anything really. As many as tea varieties, Chinese have cures of multiple types, and some particular masters who know what can help in which cases. It's a big world. But as we don't drink alcohol, we won't try anything. But once I was cured with a tincture of herbs. It helped a lot. But you should investigate it deeply. I am satisfied with tea, which is a medicine itself. You drink some and don't get ill. In China, I had the flu sometimes, of course, but not very much, despite my intensive rhythm. And sometimes I get little sleep, or I'm travelling for very long, and I would say that tea is what nourishes me mostly. The Chinese like to treat themselves with these mountain tinctures. We've arrived in a real wilderness, but we've been driving for more than an hour already, on a very muddy road. Further in the mountains, there are villages with more interesting teas, but the road to them is quite specific, I would call it. And now the road is stuff like this. It's crazy. But I'm sure it'll be built in a while. And if you remember the main road to Zhen, it's broken down too. We were very long on the way. On the whole, Guangxi province is not rich. They generally have different agrarian businesses and no large-scale industry at all. The industry that they do have is not enough. That's why everything here is more ordinary and more cheap. And the people are poorer. It's mostly farmers. Many plants are cultivated here. It's a modest province, very modest. And the roads are more modest. Or they just don't exist in some places. We got further in the mountains, significantly further. And here begin the lands of tea plantations only. The tea factories are often placed much lower. And here are the plantations. It's a chance to talk to the farmers. Look what they do, how they pick tea and so on. In this very place, they're not picking so much. So we'll have a look further on. I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that huge territories are getting planted with young tea bushes. What does this mean? It means that the demand for Liubao is increasing, because otherwise they wouldn't do this. There's a need for more raw tea, in bigger volumes. The tea is planted more and more. Lots of new plantations are found. Behind me you can see the developed lands. And near us all around there are many young bushes of 1 or 2 years old. So I suppose we may expect a reduction of price for fresh Liubao. Or at least an increase of volume. We'll see. I'd like to draw your attention too that in the higher areas there are less villages. The river is clean, the climate is comfortable. I see that not the whole mountain is deforested for plantations. Only certain sites from the sunny sides as a rule. The rest is covered with forest. Approximately 50% of forest and 50% of tea plantation. It's interesting what we'll see. We hope to come by some factory going downside and to taste the local tea. Now we're drinking tea at one of the factories in the mountains. And here comes the mother of the lady, which is the factory owner. She is 97 years old. She drank Liubao all her life. The best advertisement. We've finally come to the place that we've been searching for very long. And now we're tasting big amounts of Lao Cha. We started with teas made in 2008. Then also some made in 2008, but of a different variety. Now we're drinking the tea of 2001. It's called Bin Lanjiang, which translates as having the Bin Lan aroma. The teas are very potent. They're similar to puer, but because of a different fermentation, they're much more soft and smooth. But the prices for the raw tea are different here, of course, compared with Yunnan, because they have smaller planted areas. And the second reason is that the fermentation is more complicated. Nobody puts tea in large heaps. It ferments in baskets. And it needs much more time, surely, because there's no wet stacking. But the tea is absolutely different. I think we'll have it in any case. Though it's not a product for mass consumption, especially if good quality raw material is used. Most of the varieties we've brought before were large leaf Liubao, or were from big factories. The raw tea actually from Liubao, the original place, is absolutely different. We're drinking Liubao from the 80s. I never drank such tea. That's why I like China, because every time I come here I find something radically new. This one is to drink at the factory only, because the price is too high even to buy a little for ourselves. We entered the warehouse and came across a few kinds of Liubao bricks, and we're going to taste some more. They always tell the same story. There's nothing left. Everything is finished. And then I say, "What's this?" Very little is left. And I say, "Let's drink." So we rob people of tea and go to taste. We decided to taste the local bricks. We found out that they have some. One of them is an aged one, rather old, made of good, fine, raw material. This one is about 2 or 3 years old. This one is older than 10. This tea is younger, about 4 or maybe 3 years old. It seems that she said it was 3. This is a large leaf Liubao. We had such some time ago, and yesterday bought the similar one at the farm. By the way, it has a very pleasant aroma. It needs careful storage. We even had a situation that there was some Liubao which rotted a little, and we had to throw it away. So it's very important. As it has wide leaves, I put a lot. This brick is about 6 years aged. It's the same brick but aged. The woman owner said the tea was picked in winter. It's interesting. I guess in November or December. But usually it's dense enough. And besides, it has good value for money. We're draining the first infusion. My charban is dirty because of so much leaves. They're crumbling. The tea is seemingly the same, but the infusions strongly differ, even in colour. There is some green here because it's the youngest. This is a little older by 2 or 3 years, but the Chin Wei has begun, very soft. Reminds me of Hei Cha very much, good Hei Cha. This one is older. And for these I don't have enough water, we'll wait till it boils. I didn't have enough cups, so I'll have a teapot for the 4th variety, and a tasting cup for the 5th, with another cup instead of a lid. We're draining it. It's ready to drink. First infusion. The miserable cat is howling. It's been bought for a child, but they won't let it go. They keep it in a sack with a hole, because it's to be taken home. We're tasting. First one is aged. There's something from Shu and from Hei Cha. Very nice. The second is light. Reminds me of the bricks that we brought earlier. But the raw material here seems to be better. The third one is something between them. Actually, every variety is awesome in its own way. It was the second infusion. We'll go from this side because we didn't taste these. Now the factory owner is discussing with our driver. She says that Liubao is tea number 1 in Guangxi. And it's true. It is the most famous tea. We're going to stay in Guangxi for some time. Look at local red tea and green tea. I had it a long time ago from Hengxiang. Quite simple but tasty tea. And this is Lao Cha. The lid is original. Because there's no lid, so I closed. So let's try these 2 last ones. It is already. It's more simple than the loose leaf tea from before. But in general it's quite a good brick. This is young. It tasted like sheng. And delicious too. Smoky. We'll see how much they ask for it. This is still my favourite. The most pleasant. Very light but pleasant too. Something between. Now the thing is to understand which costs how much and then I'll make a choice. All the varieties are really nice. So there are 3 bricks of large leaf tea of different age. The youngest, the middle and the oldest. And 2 made of good raw materials containing buds. A young one and an old one, the most representative choice. I should say that the young is quite interesting. These 2 are my favourites. We're making the last infusions. Generally, I made up my mind. This Liubao cha is quite worthy. This is the young brick, an aged one. This is the warehouse of the factory. It's more professional. The loose leaf tea is being aged here. Liubao loose leaf tea. A detached room. There are infrared lamps here to prevent mould that's not useful. Here's the humidifier, humidity control, temperature control. The baskets are kept in darkness. Similar warehouses I saw in Anhui province. When we visited a Luan cha factory, one more variety of hei cha, and there was a similar warehouse there, with bamboo baskets with tea inside, covered with bamboo lids. There are tags on them where the name of the tea is written. The baskets are carefully put on one another. It's extremely important to maintain the needed humidity and temperature. Even the floor is covered with wooden deck to prevent too high humidity. The climate is very wet here, so when such tea is stored in improper humidity in open space or in foggy mountains, and fog is constantly affecting it, the tea spoils very fast. We were recently in Fujian, and I saw a whole batch of puer spoiled that was kept in a humid place. So careful storage of tea is extremely important. Here they keep only loose raw materials. Bricks are kept separately. The bricks are less sensitive to humidity, so they press them very dense, and they're kept better in such a way. Loose leaf tea is very sensitive. It's extremely important to observe the technology. They mostly try to maintain the mid-year humidity. They maintain its level from 20 to 30. High will be worse. At the wet puer warehouse it can be up to 60, and it's normal. But here too high humidity is not needed. In this case, Liubao will be aged properly. Now we're in a production room on the factory floor, and I'll tell you about how all the process of Liubao cha production goes. The traditional Liubao cha, because the factory stands far in the mountains, and the local technology did not change for dozens of years. As they did it in the past, they do now. If I understand correctly, it has a longer history. The factory was rebuilt and reopened. The present owner started making tea in the 70s, and at the beginning of the 2000s founded her own farm. Before it was like a collective farm. They worked on the basis of communism. So these are fresh leaves. You can see that the sort of Liubao has many purple shoots, and it differs strongly in appearance. The local sort is quite original. Firstly, very slight weidiao goes, or drying of primary moisture, and then shai sing goes, killing green. I'll show you a machine. It looks like this. So here shai sing happens. Fresh leaves are loaded here, get run, roasted, and collected. After shai sing is done, the raw material is placed there. Twisting, or runian, happens here. You can see that the usual twisting machines are transformed. Wooden boxes are added. Every factory master adds and invents his own stuff. After twisting, tea takes its original way, which makes it different from sheng puer or green tea or any other, because the first stages are very similar. Wei Diao, Shai Xing, Runian. After twisting, the tea is put into such baskets. In these particular baskets, where they put the fresh leaves now, it's because they were just harvesting fresh leaves. The primary fermentation happens inside. It lasts about 15 hours depending on the raw material. So the leaves are put in and left for 15 hours for fermentation. After that, hongan, or drying, it goes on quite a low heat. In this container, tang bei happens, the drying after fermentation. Here the different raw materials can be seen. This is one with shoots, young leaves, spring tea, the most expensive. This is winter tea. It has usually large leaves and is used for bricks mostly, though the spring tea may also be used for it. But more often, the large leaf tea is used. This tea they often use for making aged lao cha, not that one which always gets pressed. After this, good tea is usually stored for about 3 years, and after that it gets packed in bags. And it's either kept in bags for some time. Ideally this happens. Here's a particular warehouse for semi-finished product. There are the same bags here. The needed temperature is maintained. They stay there 2 or 3 years ideally. Some farmers force the technology. There are large factories in the Wuzhou town, the most famous Wuzhou Chacheng, and many others. And then the next technology is carried out, that's also very original. The raw material gets put in a steamer. There's a small amount of raw material prepared. They take and place this stuff right here. This is a steam generator. The water is constantly boiling, and clouds of vapour go up. And this long mould, there are holes at the bottom. You can see. It's placed here, gets covered with a lid, and the steaming begins. Steaming of tea. They waited until it absorbs moisture, but not very much. And only after this the fermentation happens. I'll show it in a while. Firstly, I'll tell you what's the big difference from puer production technology. Preparing puer tea is irrigated with cold, clean water. And the amount of water is so big that fermentation is more intensive. In our case, fermentation is milder, because here it's just a slight moisturizing of leaves, but not as powerful as with puers. And even puer in basket, the technology is different anyway. Here they do steaming. After that, the steamed tea is put into such wooden boxes, and the natural fermentation takes place here. I noticed that the temperature is not so hot. It looks like just tea is lying, and it's really nearly prepared as I understand. The last stage, very dry. The fermentation lasts from 1 month to 2, depending on the kind of raw material used. Looking at this wooden deck, you can see what small amounts this factory has. This is not a family business, though, somehow bigger. Anyway, the factory is not large. So they put down a few hundred kilos of raw tea in such a big heap. It's considered that in 2 or 3 months, Liubao will be prepared. This is Liubao that's produced for long-term storage, when it's already fermented. It's put in such baskets. Here they are. And the baskets get placed in that room that I've shown you, where the aging takes place. But there's another kind. And we're bringing it already, and we'll bring some more. The tea that just passed the first Hong Bei when it dried. Before it will be put for storage for 2 to 3 years for fermenting, and then they'll sell it. And these 2 kinds of Liubao, Sheng Liubao, also called wet Liubao, and Shu Liubao, one which passes through fermentation, and the other which did not. The difference is like the difference between puer and sheng puer. The same can be said about heicha. The difference is fermentation. Either the tea is fermented or not. The raw materials vary strongly too. Either it's harvested in winter and consists of large leaves, or it's harvested in spring. Surely there are many intermediate stages and experimental technologies, but I described the basic ones. One more interesting thing about the factory, as it has small volumes of tea, they can adjust these big wooden pallets and quantity. This partition is movable. It's fixed with simple iron staples, you can see it. A few varieties may ferment at the same time. Here's the first partition. The second heap is over there. I asked, by the way, and this heap has been laying for more than 1 month, and it will be done soon. If there are big amounts of raw tea, the overall quantity may overcome 2 tons. If the amounts are small, or it comprises raw materials of different harvest or quality, they ferment it consequently in a number of sections. 3 or 4 kinds of raw materials may ferment at the same time, but on the whole the amount is not big. A single batch of high-quality Liubao, made of spring raw material, is a few hundreds of kilos, not more. The whole factory consists of rooms, and a major part of the rooms is used for the various storages. Right here the fresh raw material is placed, similar to the previous one. But in that one, the bags of cheaper tea are being aged for 2 or 3 years before the fermentation. And here lays the fresh raw materials, and as a rule it has no chance to wait for fermentation. It's usually purchased, not aged, namely this bag, which is the only one. It has a caption, which means that the tea is plucked from 100-year-old trees. These are so-called gushu cha or laoshu cha. That means old tea trees or ancient tea trees. They're usually about 100 years old, give or take. In appearance it's like puer, a kind of mao cha. It smells delicious, very sweet, very original. Perhaps the tea smells so, only here. It's great that it has its certain hint. We'll think, and maybe we'll buy a little of such tea, as it is an interesting thing. The tea is original and peculiar. However, the price is comparable to that of gushu in Yunnan, and the quantity is appropriate. They say that there's a little number of these trees. At the time when tea was largely harvested, before the time of private property, the trees were very frequently cut. The same problem was in Yunnan too, just because of ignorance, like, it's an old tree, let's cut it and grow young ones. They could not see the difference, because in that time the quality was not valuable, but the volume. Now when the attention is paid to it, there is for example a tea from tea bushes, and the tea of a seemingly the same sort but from old trees. They're completely different in aroma, even in leaves appearance. The difference is huge, and the teas are of different grades. We drank a similar one at one of the shops yesterday, tasted, but honestly I suppose at a factory it would be more interesting, because firstly they're the producers and not dealers, and the second, the quality is obviously better even visually and in aroma.